When I walked through the front door that Tuesday afternoon, my entire life sat packed in 3 navy duffel bags lined up against the staircase like soldiers waiting for orders. I stopped mid-step, grocery bags still dangling from both hands. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something else I couldn't name. Something final. Vanessa stood in the hallway, arms folded across her chest, wearing that cream-colored cardigan she only pulled out when she wanted to look respectable. Her expression wasn't angry or apologetic. Just blank, like she was watching a delivery driver drop off a package. Behind her, halfway down the hall, my father leaned against the doorframe to his study. He didn't look at me directly. His eyes stayed fixed somewhere near the floor, hands shoved deep into his pockets. I set the groceries down carefully on the entry table. My pulse hammered against my ribs, but my voice came out steady. "What's happening?" Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "I think it's time you found your own place, sweetheart. You're old enough now." No explanation. No warning. Just bags by the door and my father standing there like furniture. I looked past Vanessa, directly at my father. "Dad?" He cleared his throat but didn't move from the doorframe. His shoulders sagged forward like he'd been holding something heavy for too long and finally decided to drop it. "Your stepmother and I discussed this. We think it's best for everyone." Best for everyone. That phrase people use when they mean best for them. I waited for him to say more, to offer some explanation that made sense. Maybe an apology, or at least a hint of regret. But he just stood there, avoiding my eyes like I was a stranger asking for directions he didn't know. Vanessa adjusted the collar of her cardigan. "We're not trying to hurt you. This is just how things need to be now." Her tone was the same one she used when explaining why we couldn't afford the college fund my mother had started. Practical, calm, completely unmovable. I realized then that this wasn't a spontaneous decision made in anger. This was planned. Coordinated. They'd discussed it over breakfast, maybe over several breakfasts, while I was out working my shift at the bookstore. The silence stretched between us like a canyon nobody wanted to cross. I didn't argue. Didn't beg. Didn't ask them to reconsider. Something inside me understood that fighting would only give Vanessa what she wanted, proof that I was difficult, dramatic, everything she'd probably been telling my father I was. Instead, I picked up the first duffel bag and slung it over my shoulder. Then the second. The third one I carried in my hand. Vanessa stepped aside to give me room, her face still blank. My father finally looked up, and for just a second, I thought I saw something flicker across his expression. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. But it disappeared before I could be sure. I walked past both of them without another word. The front door opened smoothly, no resistance, like the house itself wanted me gone. Outside, the autumn air bit at my face. My neighbor, old Mr. Callahan, was trimming his hedges across the street. He paused mid-clip and stared. I didn't wave. I loaded the bags into my car, shut the trunk, and sat in the driver's seat for exactly 30 seconds. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Then I started the engine and drove away, calm as Sunday morning. 3 years earlier, everything felt different. I was 15 when Vanessa married my father. My mother had been gone for 2 years by then, and the house still felt like a museum dedicated to her absence. Empty chairs at dinner. Quiet hallways. My father moving through rooms like a ghost. When Vanessa arrived, she brought energy back into the house. She laughed loudly, cooked elaborate meals, rearranged furniture like she was conducting an orchestra. My father smiled again. Actually smiled. I wanted that for him. Needed it, even. So when Vanessa suggested I switch to the smaller bedroom so she could use mine as a home office, I agreed without hesitation. When she asked me to skip the father-daughter trip we'd planned so she and Dad could take a weekend getaway, I said it was fine. I told myself I was being mature. Flexible. The kind of person who understood that families evolve and change. That being easy to live with was the same thing as being loved. I didn't realize I was teaching them a lesson, that I could be moved around like furniture, rearranged to fit whatever layout suited them best. 6 months after the wedding, I received an acceptance letter to a summer art program in Boston. Full scholarship. 2 months of workshops with professional painters and sculptors. My art teacher called it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I showed the letter to my father during dinner. He read it twice, then smiled that genuine smile I rarely saw anymore. "This is incredible. I'm so proud of you." Vanessa set down her fork carefully. "When does it start?" "July 7th. She glanced at my father. "That's the week of the family reunion. Your cousins are flying in. We've been planning this for months." I looked between them, waiting for my father to say something. To tell her I could miss one family event. That this program mattered. He cleared his throat. "Would it be possible to defer? Maybe attend next summer?" My chest tightened. "It's not that kind of program. It's invitation only." Vanessa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Family comes first, sweetheart. Your cousins would be so disappointed." My father nodded slowly, like she'd just said something wise instead of something selfish. I never sent the acceptance confirmation. The deadline passed quietly. Nobody mentioned it again. After that, the pattern became clearer. Vanessa would make small requests that seemed reasonable in isolation. Could I cover the grocery bill this week since she was short on cash? Could I skip my weekend plans to help her sister move apartments? Could I tell the insurance company I was driving the car the night she backed into the mailbox? Every time, I said yes. Partly because I wanted to be helpful. Partly because saying no felt dangerous, like testing the stability of a bridge I wasn't sure could hold my weight. My father watched these exchanges but never intervened. He'd perfected the art of being present without participating, nodding along while carefully avoiding eye contact. Vanessa grew bolder. She started answering questions people asked me directly, speaking over me at family gatherings, introducing me to her friends as the quiet one with a laugh that made it sound like an adorable quirk instead of a survival strategy. I told myself she didn't mean anything by it. That she was just confident, assertive, the kind of woman who naturally took up space. But late at night, alone in my smaller bedroom, I started wondering if kindness without boundaries looked an awful lot like weakness to people determined to see it that way. There was one thing I kept completely private. One thing Vanessa never asked about and I never offered to explain. A sealed envelope stored in a fireproof lockbox under my bed, labeled in my mother's handwriting, to be opened when you turn 18, or sooner if absolutely necessary. My mother gave it to me a week before she died. I was 12 years old and terrified. She looked so small in that hospital bed, tubes and monitors surrounding her like unwanted guests. "This is important," she'd whispered, pressing the envelope into my hands. "Don't let anyone take it from you. Not your father, not anyone else. Promise me." I promised. For 6 years, I kept that promise. I moved the envelope every time I switched rooms, hiding it in places Vanessa would never think to look. In the lining of an old winter coat. Inside a hollowed-out textbook. Under the loose floorboard behind my dresser. I never opened it. Part of me was terrified of what it contained. Part of me wanted to preserve my mother's final words for as long as possible, like opening the envelope would mean losing her all over again. But I knew it mattered. Knew it was important enough that she used her last clear-headed moments to make sure I had it. 2 months before the bags appeared by the door, something shifted. I overheard Vanessa talking to her sister on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping intentionally, I was just walking past the kitchen when I caught my name. She's always been a little unstable. Emotional. I think it runs in the family, honestly. My feet stopped moving. No, no. I've tried to help her. But she's so resistant to guidance. Yesterday, she completely overreacted when I suggested she consider community college instead of that expensive university. I hadn't overreacted. I'd simply said I'd already been accepted and planned to attend. But in Vanessa's retelling, my calm statement became hysterics. She continued. I'm worried about leaving her here unsupervised. You know how these things can escalate. Her sister's response was muffled, but Vanessa laughed. Exactly. It's not about being cruel. It's about being realistic. I backed away slowly, my pulse hammering. This wasn't accidental misunderstanding. This was deliberate reframing. She was building a narrative, painting me as unstable and difficult so that whatever came next would seem justified, even necessary. The financial pressure started subtly. First, Vanessa mentioned that my father's business was struggling. Could I contribute more toward household expenses? Just temporarily, of course. I increased my hours at the bookstore and handed over most of my paycheck. Then my car insurance bill arrived, except Vanessa had quietly removed me from the family plan without warning. I had to scramble to find individual coverage that cost twice as much. Next, my college fund. The one my mother had started before she got sick. My father was the account trustee, but he always promised the money was mine when I turned 18. 3 weeks before my birthday, he called me into his study. We need to have a difficult conversation. My stomach dropped. He explained that unexpected expenses had come up. Medical bills, house repairs, things beyond their control. They'd had to borrow from the college fund. Just temporarily. They'd pay it back. How much? I asked. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Most of it. The floor felt unstable beneath my feet. Years of my mother's careful saving, gone. Used for expenses that somehow only appeared after Vanessa entered the picture. I didn't argue. What would be the point? The money was already gone. I started preparing without fully understanding what I was preparing for. I opened a separate bank account Vanessa didn't know about. I transferred what little money I had left. I made copies of important documents, my birth certificate, social security card, mother's death certificate, medical records. I wasn't planning revenge. I was building a lifeboat while the ship was still afloat, just in case. On my 18th birthday, alone in my room after a dinner where Vanessa served a cake she knew I was allergic to by accident, I finally opened the lockbox. The envelope sat there, cream-colored and slightly yellowed at the edges. My mother's handwriting across the front looked exactly like I remembered. I held it for several minutes, my hands shaking slightly. Then I carefully broke the seal. Inside were 3 pages written in my mother's careful script, and one official document I didn't recognize at first. I started reading, and with each line, the floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Everything I thought I understood about my family was wrong. 2 weeks after I moved out, I received an unexpected phone call. My father's cousin, Diane, someone I'd only met a handful of times at family gatherings. Her voice was warm but confused. I'm calling about the anniversary party. Your father and Vanessa sent an invitation. It says you're no longer living at home? I gripped the phone tighter. That's correct. Oh. Long pause. That's surprising. The invitation also mentioned you've decided to take some time away from the family. To focus on personal growth. Personal growth. Of course, that's how Vanessa would frame it. Diane continued. I just wanted to reach out because, well, that doesn't sound like you. And the party is in 3 weeks. We'd love to see you there. Something in her tone told me she didn't fully believe the story she'd been given. Maybe other family members felt the same way. I'll be there, I said. After we hung up, I sat in my tiny studio apartment and stared at the wall. A public family gathering. Witnesses everywhere. Vanessa confident enough to announce my absence like it was my choice. She had no idea what was coming. That night, I finally read the letter completely. My mother's words were clear, methodical, written by someone who knew she was running out of time. My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I need you to understand something your father doesn't know I discovered. The house we live in was purchased by my parents and given to me before your father and I married. The deed is in my name alone. I kept it that way deliberately, as protection. My breath caught. I've arranged with my attorney that upon your 18th birthday, or upon your father's remarriage, whichever comes first, full ownership transfers to you. Not to your father. To you. This is your inheritance, your security. I watched my own mother lose everything to a man who promised stability and delivered betrayal. I won't let that happen to you. I flipped to the attached document. A property deed, legally notarized, with transfer conditions clearly outlined. The house wasn't my father's to control. It never had been. It was mine. And he'd been living in it, making decisions about it, letting Vanessa renovate it, all while having zero legal authority to do so. I spent the next 3 days rereading everything with new understanding. Every time Vanessa had redecorated, she'd been changing my house. Every time she'd suggested I move to a smaller room, she'd been rearranging my property. Every time my father had stood silent while she made decisions, he'd been enabling someone to control something that didn't belong to either of them. The college fund made sense now too. My mother must have known my father struggled with boundaries, with saying no to strong personalities. She protected what mattered most: shelter, security, stability. I pulled out my phone and searched for my mother's attorney. The law firm was still operating, still in the same downtown office. I called and asked to speak with Mr. Patterson. His secretary put me through immediately. "I've been wondering when you'd call," he said. "Your mother left very specific instructions." We talked for 40 minutes. He confirmed everything the letter stated and explained the next steps. The transfer was already legally complete. I just needed to file the proper paperwork and assert my ownership. "Your father received notification when you turned 18, Mr. Patterson added. "He's known for 3 months. 3 months. He'd known I owned the house, and he'd still let Vanessa pack my bags and push me out the door." The week before the anniversary party, Vanessa posted on social media photos of the redecorated living room, new furniture arranged artfully, expensive-looking curtains framing the windows. The caption read, "Finally have the house exactly how we want it." Sometimes you need to clear out the old to make room for the new. Comments poured in. Friends congratulating her on the beautiful space. Relatives saying how happy they looked. One comment caught my attention. "Vanessa's sister, so glad you finally have your space back. Some transitions are harder than others, but you handled it with such grace." I screenshot everything. Diane called me again. "Did you see the post?" I did. Something feels wrong about all this. The way they're acting, the things Vanessa keeps saying about you needing independence. It doesn't add up. I stayed quiet. "Will you still come to the party?" "Wouldn't miss it." The truth was building pressure like water behind a dam. The party would be the crack that let everything flood through. My Uncle Howard called me the day before the party. "Hey, kiddo. Your dad mentioned you've been going through a tough time. You doing okay?" I'd always liked Uncle Howard. He was the kind of person who noticed when something didn't quite fit, who asked questions instead of accepting easy answers. "I'm actually doing fine, Uncle Howard. Better than I've been in a while." "That's good." He paused. "Vanessa mentioned you'd been struggling with some emotional issues. Said it was part of why you moved out." There it was again. The story they were spreading. What kind of emotional issues? She wasn't specific. Just said you'd been having a hard time adjusting to certain family changes. That you needed space to figure things out. My jaw tightened. Uncle Howard, do me a favor. At the party tomorrow, just watch how things unfold. I think you'll understand everything much more clearly. He was silent for a moment. That's a strange thing to say. I know. But trust me. After we hung up, I laid out my clothes for the party. Black slacks, a simple gray sweater, minimal jewelry. I wanted to look composed, unremarkable, like someone who had nothing to prove. The letter and property deed sat in my bag, tucked into a protective folder. Tomorrow, everything changed. The party was held at my uncle's house, a sprawling property with a large backyard perfect for gatherings. I arrived exactly on time, parked at the end of the driveway, and walked up carrying a small gift bag. About 30 relatives milled around, some inside, some on the patio, everyone holding drinks and making small talk. Vanessa saw me first. Her expression froze mid-laugh, the smile still plastered across her face but her eyes suddenly alert. My father stood beside her, talking to my aunt. He followed Vanessa's gaze and spotted me. His face went pale. I walked up calmly, handed the gift bag to my aunt, and greeted everyone with a polite smile. Thanks for inviting me. It's good to see everyone. Diane appeared at my elbow almost immediately, giving me a quick hug. Glad you made it. The atmosphere had shifted. Conversations continued, but people were watching now, curious about the dynamic, sensing something unspoken hanging in the air. Vanessa recovered quickly, stepping forward with open arms like we were dear friends reunited. Sweetheart, I'm so glad you came. I didn't hug her back. Just stood there until she dropped her arms awkwardly. We should talk, I said quietly. Vanessa's smile tightened. Maybe later, honey. Let's not make a scene. I kept my voice calm, clear, loud enough that nearby relatives could hear. I'm not making a scene. I'm just clarifying something important. Something I think everyone should understand. My father stepped forward. This isn't the time or place. Uncle Howard moved closer, curious now. Diane stayed at my side. Other relatives began gravitating toward us, conversations trailing off. I pulled the folder from my bag and held it calmly at my side. 3 months ago, I turned 18. That same day, according to legal documents my mother prepared before she died, ownership of our family house transferred to me. Not to Dad. To me. Silence dropped like a heavy curtain. Vanessa's face went blank. My father closed his eyes briefly. I continued, steady and clear. My mother purchased that house before she married Dad. She kept it in her name as protection. She arranged for it to pass to me, not through a will, but through a direct transfer of deed. It's been legally mine since my birthday. Diane's mouth fell open. Uncle Howard's eyebrows shot up. My aunt set down her drink. Vanessa found her voice, shaky now. That's ridiculous. Your father owns that house. We've lived there for years. I opened the folder and held up the deed. The county records say otherwise. My father finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I knew. Every head turned toward him. You knew? Vanessa's voice cracked. What do you mean you knew? He looked at the ground. The attorney sent notification when she turned 18. I've known for 3 months that the house legally belongs to her. The weight of that confession settled over everyone like fog. Uncle Howard leaned back against the patio railing, arms crossed. So you packed her bags and kicked her out of her own house? My father didn't answer. Didn't defend himself. Vanessa's face went through several expressions at once: shock, anger, fear, calculation. She was trying to find an angle, a way to spin this, but the truth was too solid, too documented. Diane looked at me with something like awe. "You've known all along?" I opened the letter my mother left me on my 18th birthday. 2 weeks after they packed my bags. Vanessa took a step back, her hand reaching for my father's arm like she needed physical support. "This is a misunderstanding. We were trying to help you become independent. We thought." "You thought I wouldn't find out," I said simply. "You thought I'd just disappear quietly and you'd keep living in my house without consequences." Vanessa tried to recover, her voice taking on that practiced reasonable tone. "Nobody forced you out. We simply suggested it was time for you to experience adult independence. That's completely normal." Uncle Howard laughed, short and sharp. "You packed her bags without warning and told her to leave her own house. That's not guidance, Vanessa. That's eviction." She turned to face the crowd of relatives watching this unfold. "She's been difficult for months. Emotional, unstable. I have witnesses. People who've seen." "I have screenshots," I interrupted calmly. "Of you telling your sister I was unstable. Of you posting on social media about clearing out the old to make room for the new. Of you redecorating my house and acting like you owned it." Her mouth opened and closed. I pulled out my phone and held it up. "I also have documentation of the college fund my mother started. The one that somehow disappeared into household expenses right before my birthday. I have bank records. Receipts. A timeline of every financial decision made about my assets without my consent." My father's face had gone completely gray. Diane stepped closer to me, her voice gentle. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" "Because I needed to understand what was really happening. And I needed documentation." Uncle Howard cleared his throat. "So what happens now?" I looked directly at my father. "You have 30 days to move out. I'm not being cruel. I'm being fair." "That's more notice than I received." Vanessa started to protest, but my father held up his hand, stopping her. "We'll be out in 2 weeks." For the first time since I'd arrived, he looked at me fully. Really looked at me. "Your mother was always smarter than me. She knew I'd need protection from my own weaknesses. I just didn't realize she was protecting you from them too." It wasn't an apology exactly. But it was acknowledgement. Mr. Patterson had already explained the rest to me. The house was mine free and clear. No mortgage, no liens. My mother had sacrificed vacations and new cars to pay it off early, knowing it would be my foundation. Vanessa grabbed my father's arm. "You can't be serious. Where are we supposed to go?" He gently removed her hand. "We'll figure it out." Like she had to. The party dissolved after that. People hugged me, some apologizing for not noticing sooner, others just squeezing my hand in silent support. I left quietly, the same way I'd arrived, except this time the weight on my shoulders felt different. Lighter. I didn't go back to the house that night. Didn't need to make a dramatic entrance or claim my space immediately. Instead, I sat in my studio apartment and finally let myself cry. Not from sadness, but from release. 3 years of being small, being quiet, being agreeable, all of it drained out in messy, gasping sobs that left me exhausted and somehow cleaner. My phone buzzed with messages. Diane checking in. Uncle Howard saying he was proud of me. Even distant cousins I barely knew expressing support. Nothing from my father. Nothing from Vanessa. 2 days later, my father called. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I just wanted you to know I understand what I did. What I allowed to happen." I listened without responding. "Your mother tried to tell me once that I needed to be stronger. That being agreeable wasn't the same as being kind. I didn't understand what she meant. I think I do now. Okay, I said simply. The house will be empty by the end of next week. He hung up before I could respond. Moving back in felt strange at first. The rooms looked different. Vanessa's decorating choices stared back at me from every corner. But underneath all of it, I could still feel my mother's presence. The bones of the house were hers. The foundation was hers. I started slowly reclaiming each space. I repainted the living room the soft green my mother had chosen originally. I moved back into my old bedroom, the larger one I'd given up without argument. I found things Vanessa had boxed up and hidden in the garage. My mother's favorite armchair. Photo albums. Small decorations that had been deemed too old-fashioned for Vanessa's aesthetic. I brought them all back inside. The house began breathing again. Settling into itself. Becoming mine not just legally, but emotionally. Uncle Howard stopped by one afternoon with a casserole. Your mother would be proud of you, he said. Not just for standing up for yourself, but for how you did it. With dignity. That word again. Dignity. It had been my shield through everything. The quiet exit when the bags appeared. The calm documentation. The measured revelation at the party. I hadn't needed to scream or fight. I just needed to stand firm. 6 months after moving back, I started college. The classes were harder than I expected, but in a good way. Challenging in ways that felt productive instead of draining. I declared my major in art history, the thing I'd always loved but never had space to pursue. I got a part-time job at a gallery downtown. The owner, a woman named Claire who reminded me a little of my mother, took me under her wing. She taught me about curation, about seeing value in pieces other people overlooked. The house became more than just shelter. It became home base. A place I could leave and return to, knowing it would still be there, still mine, still stable. I planted flowers in the front garden, the same kind my mother used to grow. Neighbors I'd never spoken to before stopped to compliment them, to introduce themselves, to welcome me back. Life started feeling less like survival and more like living. Some nights I'd sit in my mother's armchair and imagine what she'd think of everything. I think she'd be satisfied. Not because I'd won some battle, but because I'd learned the lesson she tried to teach: protect yourself first, because no one else will do it for you. I heard through Uncle Howard that my father and Vanessa moved to a small apartment across town. Their marriage was struggling. Vanessa had expected my father to fight for the house, to challenge the deed, to prioritize her over everything. When he didn't, when he quietly accepted the consequences of his choices, something between them broke. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. Just a distant, neutral acknowledgement that actions have weight, and eventually everyone has to carry what they've chosen. My father called once, months later. I'm not asking to come back. I just wanted to hear your voice. We talked for 10 minutes about nothing important. The weather. His new job. My classes. Before hanging up, he said, I lost your mother twice. Once to cancer, once to my own cowardice. I can live with that. I just hope someday you don't have to. I didn't have an answer for that. After we hung up, I realized forgiveness wasn't something I owed anyone. It wasn't a debt to be paid. It was something that might arrive on its own, quietly, years from now, or it might not. Either way, I'd be okay. A year after everything changed, Diane threw me a small birthday party in my backyard. 20 people showed up. Family members who'd supported me. Friends from college and work. Claire from the gallery. Even Mr. Patterson, the attorney who'd protected my mother's final gift. We ate cake on the patio my mother had designed. We laughed in rooms she'd painted. We celebrated in the house she'd sacrificed so much to secure. At one point, Uncle Howard pulled me aside. You know what the best part of this whole story is? I shook my head. You didn't become bitter. You didn't let them turn you into something smaller or meaner. You just became more yourself. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood in the doorway and looked at my house. My home. My foundation. Vanessa had wanted me to disappear quietly. My father had wanted to avoid discomfort. They'd both underestimated what silence could contain, what patience could build, what a mother's love could protect across time and death. I didn't reclaim the house that day at the party. I reclaimed something bigger, my right to exist without apology, my worth without performance, my identity without permission. The house was just walls and floors. What I'd actually won was myself. And that victory would last forever.